All right, teammates, welcome to the Blueprint Leadership Podcast. I'm Kaleth Wright, the 18th Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. Now, during this time, you'll hear from some of my friends and some of my favorite leaders across the Air Force and around the world, and we'll be discussing all things leadership. Our goal is to provide insights, tips, and ultimately we want to help current and future leaders find their path and reach their leadership goals. Now, we call it Blueprint, but as we all know, there's no one way to lead. And so we just want to share some of our experiences, give you all some advice, and hopefully we can help you find your path and reach your potential as a leader.
I've always sought to be a leader that leads by example in everything they do. And so even though I grew up as an armored reconnaissance guy, I knew that in order to be the best, you had to go out and prove it. And that's why I chose to serve in the 82nd Airborne Division for so many years. I chose to attend and graduate Ranger School, and I chose to attend and graduate Pathfinder School, and I chose to go to the tough assignments because I wanted to be, again, that leader that was leading by example, and to show every man and woman that may be up under my influence that they have to look no further than me to be the example.
Ladies and gentlemen, those were words of wisdom from our guest, who happens to be a very good friend. He is the best guest we've ever had. He's also the first guest we've ever had. It's an honor to have him. He is a personal friend who kicks our butts at PT every chance he gets. He is the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, also known as SEAC No. 3, Command Sergeant Major John Wayne Troxell.
Thanks, K. Wright. I appreciate being here. It's truly an honor to be here with you, my friend, but to be your first guest that you've done, that you have the confidence and faith in me being your first guest, kind of up the bar a little bit. So I'm going to make sure I'm on my A game here today.
Yeah, absolutely. So we go way back, and again, thank you for all the leadership and mentorship over the years. So this is our inaugural show, and I think we should start off just really kicking right in and talking about leadership. So why don't you break down your path and how you became the third Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff? Yeah,
so I've been in 37 years now. I've been a Sergeant Major for 19 years. And when I retire, I'll have 20 years as a Sergeant Major, which generally for some folks is a career, you know. But I grew up in a maneuver, fire, and effects field. I'm a reconnaissance guy. A lot of time in the 82nd Airborne Division, a lot of time in Stryker units. But what's unique about me, and it really hasn't been a planned out career path, is that for about the last 9 years, I've been in joint and multinational types of assignments. As the ISAF Joint Command Senior Enlisted Leader in Afghanistan, part of the rebalance as U.S. Army First Corps in the Pacific, as part of the Indo-PACOM team, and then at U.S. Forces Korea prior to this job, and for the last 4 years in this job. So I think to get to become the SEAC, those opportunities that I had in the joint and multinational environment certainly set me up to be interviewed for this job. And then I think that might have been a deciding factor when General Dunford selected me. So it's one of the things that I've really, over the last 4 years, I'm trying to get after is more joint opportunities. I certainly appreciate General Goldfein and your focus on developing joint leaders, which has helped us a lot. But I think we can be more predictable in the future. So potentially we could say this is the person that needs to continue on and compete as the SEAC. I think mine was more, by accident than it was by design, and but in the end it all worked out.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if it was by accident, but I appreciate the sentiment nonetheless. On your social media, I always see whenever you go out and you visit either the troops or you're doing something important for our nation, you have hashtag best job I ever had. What's that all about? I mean, what do you think makes it the best job?
So, because of the faith and confidence that General Dunford and now General Milley have in me, and Secretary Carter, Secretary Mattis, Secretary Shanahan, and now Secretary Esper have in me, to be able to get out and gain the pulse of the force for them. It's allowed me to go anywhere in the world that I felt I needed to go and visit troops where that may be off the beaten path. So when I have the opportunity I've been to Syria 3 times, Iraq 10 times, Afghanistan 9 times, Turkey 11 times, and then to places like Somalia, Yemen, Libya, the Korean Peninsula, all of these places where we have troops that are either building partner capacity or they are actually engaged in combat or assuring our allies and attracting new partners. It allows me to get out and gain that pulse of the force. And if I weren't the SEAC and I didn't have, the trust and confidence of the chairman and the Secretary of Defense, I wouldn't be able to get out to some of these locations out there where we have troops, where we have airmen that are out doing yeoman's work, and you never hear about them because they're off the beaten path. Mm-hmm. So that's why I use that hashtag, because it has just given me an opportunity to have the global pulse of the force, regardless of what service it is. And that's why I use that hashtag, because this is truly the best job I've ever had.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I think all of your followers love it and can actually see it when they engage with you, whether it's on social media or in person. Now, you talked about all those trips to Syria and Yemen and many other, Turkey and many other places. That's a lot of travel, and it's a lot of overseas travel.
Yeah.
So how, as a leader, I think many of our listeners will be interested in, how do you maintain balance or harmony with that amount of travel that you have to do for the job?
Well, you and I just talked about this before we came on air, and one thing we have to realize when you become a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Senior Enlisted Advisor Team, whether you're the SEAC, the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, or the Senior Enlisted Leader of any of the services, that you're coming into this job for 4 years. And all of us come in, and we are going to go out and get after the mission and everything. And we forget that over 4 years, it's got to be a marathon and not a sprint. And you and I both shared that we came out of the starting blocks, moving about 100 miles an hour.
Oh, man, yeah.
But one thing I've learned is that I have to be predictive in how I make sure that I'm getting out and doing the things that the SEAC position requires me to do, but also that I'm putting in quality time with my family or time for me to execute an acronym that I like to use called REST. That means read, exercise, sleep, and think. And there's times that, and I'm sure you and Tanya are the same way, there's times Sandra and I will pull a calendar out and we will say, okay, this day right here, we're going to spend together. Now, I hate going out and going shopping. I'm one of those guys that, just hates going out and being at. But if it's a day that I can take a break from doing the duties and I can spend it as part of quality time with my wife, I'll do it. But again, it's not something I like to do, but it's something I understand that, in order to make sure that I'm balancing the time between the duties and life as, a military spouse or with my military spouse, I've got to make sure that I am cognizant of that and program in that quality time. Otherwise, it could be, a rough time at the house,
Yeah.
So I make sure that over the course of the last 4 years, I've kind of gotten better at it, even though the first year I was terrible at it. 270 days on the road, and and I know you're the same way as me, but I've kind of learned and I've kind of gotten better and more cognizant of making sure that I take care of myself and my family.
I know one of the ways that you keep yourself in good shape and able to travel is the extensive amount of your fitness regimen, which you invite the senior leaders across the military quite often. And if people are following you on social media, they always see another hashtag, PME Hard. Can you tell us what that stands for and what that means to you?
Yeah, so this was something I adopted about 11 years ago when I was part of Surge Brigade No. 4 in Iraq during the surge. And I realized in a hurry we were up against one of the most insidious enemies we've ever faced in Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And it was at the time when there was a lot of unrest amongst the Sunni and Shia population in Iraq. So it was a very rough time. And I noticed that 130 degrees out. My troops were carrying 60 to 80 pounds of kit on any given day over rough and uneven terrain. And the minute we came into theater, we were enduring about 200 attacks a day across the brigade. And I realized that bad things can happen to the best kind of organizations. And in order to be able to be resilient and bounce back and have the desired effect that we're trying to have, either in this case against an enemy or when we're trying to solve problems or whatever, that we had to have the utmost resiliency. And so PME hard, it means physically, mentally, and emotionally hard. And I think that's, so when we talk about people being tough, I think that's one aspect, but I think we need to go a little bit farther, and they need to be hard, meaning that they are not easily penetrable by conditions outside or adversity or anything like that. So I kind of adopted that in the foundation is the physical part, because I think the more healthy and fit we are, it's just a given we'll be more mentally and emotionally resilient. So I've kind of used this hashtag over the last 11 years to try and direct leaders and troops of all the services on, we got to be prepared for the worst day of our life. And that's not necessarily in a combat scenario every day. And I know you talk about this all the time to the airmen. You know, and nowadays when someone gets a no-pay due, that is a significant event in not only the service member's life, but their family's life. Or if they have an auto accident, or if just anything that happens out there, they lose their wallet or something like that, that's a significant emotional event. And how to deal with that and get beyond, okay, the event, and how do I bounce back and how do I continue to move forward? I think we've got to prepare people for the worst day of their life, and certainly dealing with death and things like that in combat, but also in everyday life. So the more physically prepared we are to deal with adversity, and the more mentally and emotionally sound we are, I think we'll be much better off.
I couldn't agree more. You know, so one of the issues that I've been tackling during my time as a chief is resilience, and really kind of centered around what we call our comprehensive airman fitness pillars, and that's physical, mental, spiritual, and social. So sometimes we take for granted the importance of having a great team around you. And so I think we all appreciate the effort that you put into your PME, and I would call it somewhat of a battle cry, right? It gives people something to think about. Hey, what's a typical day like in the life of the SEAC when you're not in Syria or doing some of that stuff?
So I have a pretty lockstep personal battle rhythm. So I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning every morning. I go downstairs, I get a cup of coffee, I go into my skiff at my house, and I get on my all three of my networks to see what's happened overnight and where we are in the critical places around the world and how the troops are doing. And after that, 5 o'clock, I'm doing PT, and I'm usually done by 6:30. And I'm generally in the office at 7 so that I can attend the director of the Joint Staff's meeting at 7:30. One of the things that you and I had this discussion before, sometimes people, especially leaders, they don't know when to go home.
Right.
They think that the later you stay, the harder you're working.
Right. And
in some cases, I don't buy that. And I think we have to train people when to go home in a timely manner, And then, as we talked about resiliency, when to know it's time to take a break, and maybe you don't have to be in at 7 o'clock in the morning, So I understand that when the work is done during the day with my staff, and my staff says we've accomplished all missions, I know that if anything comes up, I've got a skiff at my house. So I don't have to be handcuffed to my office here in the Pentagon. And I try to make it that my team knows that unless there's something significant going on, which on the Joint Staff can happen a lot, that we're going to go home in a timely manner and allow them to get home and spend some time with their family. The last thing I want is that my team is going home at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and they get home and they might be able to see their kids for like 10 or 15 minutes because it's a school night, and then their kids are off to bed, So I think as a joint force, we can do better at this all around in terms of, knowing when to go home. But anyways, to finish that off, I get home, I have dinner with my wife and everything, and I'm normally in the rack about 8:30 at night because part of that acronym REST is sleep. And I learned this from General Dunford because General Dunford was big on he's going to get his 6 hours of sleep. Now, he may have to sacrifice and not do PT the next day, but he's going to get his sleep because in the job as the chairman, he had to provide best military advice to the SecDef and the president. So he had to be on his A game all the time. So I kind of learned from him that, and as I've gotten older, sleep is as important to me now as my workout routines. And eating right is also extremely important to me as well. And so when I'm in the building, I'm eating 6 times a day, but they're very small meals, and I make sure, that 2,000 calorie a day thing that your nutritionists talk about, they're generally right about that, and especially a guy like me at 5'9", 180 pounds. So I make sure that I'm looking out for myself throughout the day and my team to make sure that, we're not just, needlessly hanging around the Pentagon to say, hey, we got home at 7 o'clock, or we stayed till 7 o'clock.
So a couple of things in there I want to pick
absolutely.
at. One was the importance of modeling as leaders, right? Modeling the right types of behavior and not staying at work for extended hours and maintaining and having balance. And but I was also intrigued by your schedule from 7 o'clock on is fairly standard, like most of us in the Pentagon or in senior level positions. But you seem to have gotten the key to mastering the mornings up at 3:30 and kind of getting all your stuff done.
Yeah.
There's probably nobody emailing or texting you at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So, what's the key to be able to master the morning and be consistent at being productive that early?
What I say about from 3 a.m. until I get in this building at 7 a.m., it is the most serene time out of my day and out of my time as the SEAC because I control it all. Because you hit it on the head. There's nobody emailing me at 3:30 in the morning. There's generally, there might be some spot reports that come out across the, our higher level networks that will catch my attention. But generally, I can enjoy my coffee. I can read email. I can watch the news or whatever, and it is just peaceful. And it allows me to prepare myself for, starting at 7 o'clock when I come in the Pentagon, how all of a sudden the day is just going to speed up significantly. So that is my time to not only prepare but to reflect and just relax a little bit prior to the storm coming of what's known as working in the Pentagon.
And I think you got the other part right is you're in the bed early, so you get the right amount of sleep that allows you to get up and master the morning. So,
and if I could make a comment on that, sometimes leaders, carry that lack of sleep and things like it's a badge of being hard or something like that. When I see someone, a leader, especially in an operational environment, that is working themselves into a frenzy and are not getting the required sleep, I know, and you know this too because you've got significant operational experience too, that over a period of time, their performance is going to erode. And regardless of how much we talk about, I only had an hour and a half sleep last night, to me, as a leader, that's somebody I got to keep my eye on because generally, at a certain point, that's going to come back to bite them. So I think as leaders, and you talk about being the example, that we need to be the one saying, hey, get your 6-7 hours of sleep a night. Take time during the day to get your PT in. Make sure you're eating right. Nobody loves cheeseburgers better than me. And I will tell you, nobody loves going to IHOP and getting a steak omelet, better than me. But I understand that's got to be in moderation. Yeah. Because if I ate like that all the time, I'd probably be kicking myself out of the military for being overweight, So if you and I are setting the example on, this REST acronym, then I think leaders behind us will follow, and we'll be able to get after some of the challenges we have in our military.
Yeah, I say you've done a really good job modeling the right behavior for all of us, so thanks for that. Man, you're the most senior enlisted person in the whole United States military. Tell me, what's the most challenging part of the job?
Before you can be effective in this job, in terms of what you do as the individual, you've got to be a team player, and you've got to master the art of building a team. So, the Defense Senior Enlisted Leader Council. You and I have been on these things for 3 years now, and I think the toughest job, and I think one of the key reasons why we have a SEAC is how do you bridge the Joint Chiefs of Staff Senior Enlisted Advisors who are responsible for policy, organize, equip, and train and provide forces to the combatant commands, and those combatant command senior enlisted leaders who are responsible for employing forces in the operational environment. And the toughest thing I've had to do is to get the top 20 senior enlisted to come together and play nice with each other. Now, I say that in a joking manner because you and I have there's been a couple times you and I have had to pull somebody out and have a little discussion with them, But that's also the most fruitful part of being the SEAC, is that when all of a sudden you can take the top 20 senior enlisted, bring them together as a team, and they're all rolling in the right direction, and we've bridged this organize, equip, train, and operational environment divide. I think it's just a good thing. And I will tell you, last DSELC we had, when we did that PT session out there, and you were out there, and I put you teammates with one of our Air Force COCOM guys and one of our Air Force Combat Support Agency guys, and you guys were out getting after that. I made sure we took plenty of pictures because I was going to saturate the Air Force with this picture of their senior enlisted person in the entire Air Force, plus one of their combatant command and combat support agency guys. But, I've tried to be humble through this whole process and understand that, as the SEAC, you don't have any authority. The chairman is not a commander. Mm-hmm. The chairman is the global integrator. The chairman is, a coordinating authority in some aspects. And so I looked at my job as, I'm a coordinating element for the Joint Chiefs of Staff Senior Enlisted Advisors and the COCOM Senior Enlisted Advisors, and also try to be that conduit between you all and the chairman and the Secretary of Defense. And so I try to make sure that I'm a team player, and I want to be teammates and friends as opposed to, some guy that stands up here and says, you guys are going to do this, you guys are going to do this. Because one, the position doesn't have that authority, but two, I don't think that's a very good way to go about business when you have the most senior enlisted in the Department of Defense and you're trying to get to an end state on whatever it might be, and you gotta have synergy and buy-in. So it's kind of hard to get there if you're stuck on yourself and you think that you're God's gift to leadership.
No, I tell you, you've done a great job. I mean, we're a rowdy bunch, right? And none of us are short of opinions and thoughts about the world and the things that we all have to tackle. But I tell you, just watching you over these last 3 years in those meetings with all the senior enlisted leaders has been a tremendous learning experience for me, just taking notes on your level of patience, the way you build a team.
I appreciate it.
And you can be tough with us when you need to be, but mostly you allow everybody to express themselves and have their opinion, and also keep us moving in the right direction. So we appreciate that. I'm going to ask you one last question, and then we're going to turn it over to the phone lines and kind of social media. We reached out to social media and asked them to send us some questions. But last question from me was, hey, what's something about you that the forces would be surprised to know? What's an interesting fact or hobby or anything that you think people might be surprised to know about you?
I'm pretty open about who I am. I've been married to my wife, Sandra, for 36 years. Yeah. We have 3 adult children. We have 4 grandchildren. But one thing, I think that has kept me grounded besides having a great wife like Sandra, is that I haven't forgotten where I came from. And I try to make sure that I can look through that lens of an airman first class or a lance corporal or a PFC, you know. So my wife and I still love to do the things we did when we were dating. We still love to karaoke. We still love to dance. We still love to have some adult beverages in moderation. And anybody that comes to our house knows that when you show up at the house, you ain't leaving until you sing. So I'm a huge sports fan, you know, football and mixed martial arts. UFC is, you know, what I'm all about. Being from Iowa, I'm a University of Iowa fan. But all the years I spent at Fort Bragg, I'm also a huge Carolina Panther fan and have been there since 1995, or been that fan since 1995. So I'm a person that on duty, you're going to get 110% out of me. When I'm off duty, I'm going to spend time with my family. We're going to enjoy ourselves, and we're not afraid to laugh at ourselves. It's okay because, you know, it's not American Idol, it's karaoke, you know. And then if we don't, you know, we don't mind going out and, you know, and going to an event or going to a club and dancing and relaxing and enjoying ourselves. Because, you know, as I promote this PT and stuff like that, but, you know, if you work hard, you train hard, you fight hard, you know, it's okay to relax and take your time and play.
Man, I recently had a bad karaoke experience. I should have been coming to your house and practicing.
Well, so, you know, being who you are, and people that know I love karaoke, I got like 12 spot reports on the K. Wright karaoke experience. And it went from senior airman all the way to command chief master sergeant that were sending me these reports.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I took away from the experience was, and I joked, it was just a bad experience, right? Because I can't sing. But I joked with the crowd at the time that, hey, this is my shot at being vulnerable. Yeah. And one of the things that I took away from your last statement is allowing people to see exactly who you are. I don't think as leaders we do it enough.
Yes.
To allow people to see. I think sometimes when folks see a command sergeant major or a chief master sergeant, they think, man, these guys must have it together now, and they must have always had it together, and they don't know, hey, man, we're just regular people like everybody else. So I like that you share your sports teams, the Panthers, and the amount of time you spend with Sandra and karaoke and some of the other things that you enjoy. So
if we want to be approachable, which I think we have to be, then the troops need to know we're human. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, you know, we're just like them. We put our pants on the same way, you know, we drive a car the same way, you know. I mean, we've just been doing this for, you know, 3 decades, and we've just been, you know, honored to be able to get into the positions we are nowadays. But, you know, I like the way you operate as well, because you know, you're the same way. You're not afraid to show people that you're human. And I think in today's day and age, a senior leader that tries to block themselves out from showing that they're human, it's going to be counter to what we're trying to do to get our young troops to open up about what's going on with them and everything. So I think it's something important that we have to continue to get after. I enjoy being open, and it allows, I think, both you and I to connect to our service members. All right, we're going to go to our questions. We got with us today Senior Master Sergeant Harry Bubba Kibbe. So, Bubba, over to you.
Thanks, Chief. Okay, our first question comes from Twitter, SEAC, and Daily Forethought at Daily Forethought would like to know, what are some positive leadership practices that are just as effective, whether you're the SEAC or whether you're a brand new junior NCO supervising your first troop?
So I think, you know, the intangibles are the most important about leading. A leader that comes to work every day and brings energy, provides purpose, motivation, direction, inspiration, but also discipline to their formation or the men and women that they're in charge of. I think if you do that, everything else is easy. Too many times we look for tangibles to use to get after influencing young men and women, when really when you're talking about things like charisma and stuff like that, that's an intangible. And a leader, don't be afraid to be energetic. Now, that doesn't mean be obnoxious, or overbearing. It means come in and provide energy so that the men and women have a spark to say, you know what, I want to be like that person, or I want to strive for excellence because my leader is leading by example and showing us how to get after it. I think if you lead that way and you're engaged every day, and what I mean being engaged isn't just being transactional and saying, hey, if you show up to work on time, you do what I tell you to do, I'll send you home at appropriate time. You have to be transformational, meaning that you are taking young men and women and, focusing them and transforming them into reach their untapped potential and to be something that they never thought they could be. And that has to come from a leader of inspiration, charisma, and energy. And that, I think if a leader does that, everything else is easy.
Let me just jump in here because one of the things that we often talk about is all the things that you described, and you mentioned the word leadership several times. There is a difference between being a leader and a manager.
Absolutely.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing that many of our organizations are led by good managers versus great leaders.
Right.
And what advice would you have for someone that's striving, that has all of the management skills and processes? What things can or should they do to improve their leadership skills, that ability to influence, to inspire, to develop charisma?
We have to never forget it's about the people in our organization. Some of our people that are in management positions are responsible for millions upon millions of dollars worth of equipment and things like that. But in the end, the greatest treasure we have is people. And how we treat people, even if you're in a more of a managerial role instead of a leadership role, the way you treat people will have a long way in terms of, the dignity and respect that's felt throughout the organization and really the effectiveness of the organization. So, again, regardless of what someone's job is, whether they're more on the managerial side or more on the leadership side, they have to remember that even if you're someone that's a bean counter and you're worried about how much money we're spending and things like that, or how much good stewards of resources we have to be, in the end, somewhere in that AFSC or MOS or rate that you're in that may be in a managerial position, somewhere in the end, humans are going to be influenced by some decisions you're making. And that's one of the things I talk about on the joint staff all the time. We do plans, policies, and strategy on employment of the joint force and how do we support unified command plans. But in the end, we can sit up here and move military icons around on what we think where we need forces at and where we need to allocate them. But in the end, underneath that icon are thousands of men and women, and we can't forget that that's our greatest treasure, and that's always got to be the focus of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
That was for Daily Forethought. And the next question comes from Reddit. And Reddit is an anonymous site, so people have some pretty creative usernames. This question comes from Goldfish Suit. Goldfish Suit would like to know, what new thing have you tried this year that failed, and how often do you fail?
I fail quite often. I think as a leader, if you are not pushing your ability to learn and grow and develop, even if you're the SEAC, the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, or whoever you are, if you're not pushing that envelope to make yourself better every day, and you don't fail at things, and then try to learn from it and apply some best practices on how to get after it, then I think you're done as a leader. So I really can't put my finger on one thing I've failed this year. I mean, I've done a lot of things where I've tried to push the envelope in terms of development of senior enlisted, and I've ran into roadblocks. But I don't look at those as blocking obstacles. I look at those really as turning obstacles that get me to look at alternative paths to get after the desired effect I'm trying to get after. So I think, and I think you're probably the same way, there's too many times that I have done something wrong or failed or did not accomplish what I tried to accomplish, but I don't allow that to be a roadblock. I allow that to just be something that causes me to go to a different path.
Failure is part of the process. It's part of growth, and none of us should be ashamed of it. Some people say, hey, if you're not failing, it means you're not trying. But I would say it's certainly as leaders, no matter what level you operate, you have to be bold. You have to take some risk, and you have to not be afraid of failing. You just got to be able to dust yourself off. And some of the things that SEAC talked about earlier, the physical, the mental, the emotional, his PME hard concept really helps when you fall on your face. It helps you be able to pick back up and keep moving through whatever the challenges might be. So.
And if I could just add on, sometimes in these jobs, because of circumstances, because of commitments and everything, you can almost feel yourself being in quicksand. Not literally in quicksand, but figuratively, and you may not see it because you are so focused on getting to the objective on whatever you're doing. I'll give you an example. It was 2 years ago that in the month of June, I spent, out of the 30 days in June, I spent 29 on the road. I was gone for 12 or 13 days. I came back for 1 day with my family and then went for 17 more days over into Eastern Europe in places like Ukraine, Romania, Poland, and places like that. And I was about the halfway of that second trip, so about 3 straight weeks on the road. And my public affairs NCO at the time, Master Sergeant Rob Couture, and I were in a hotel in Kyiv right after we had done, all of our engagements. And we were going up to our hotel room, and he says to me, "Hey, SEAC, you think we bit off a little bit too much on this?" And I said, "Hey, absolutely not. We're all good and everything." And then it was about 2 days later, and I just felt this crush of just being exhausted and, emotionally drained and everything. So here we were back on the hotel elevator going back up, and I said, "Hey, I think you're right, and I think we got to get better at our time management here as we move forward." So sometimes we as leaders may not see it, which is why we hire these all-star people on our staffs to advise us when we think we're taking on too much.
Okay, sir, our last question comes from Unbound Redditor, who has a badge, is a cyber systems operator. They'd like to know, how can leaders at all levels become more involved in their troops' lives without being overly intrusive and break the mentality that this is just a job? For example, leaders being leaders instead of managers with quotas. And I believe you kind of addressed it earlier, but if you wouldn't mind elaborating on that.
So one of the things I used to, and I still use it today, at all levels, I would tell my troops that I was responsible for. I said, "Look, I love you as much as I love my children. So if I'm getting in your butt, it's out of love. It's not out of hate. Okay? I want you to be the best that you can be. I want you to live your life to the best that you can be. So if I'm coming into your barracks or dormitory room to check on you, it's because I care about you. It's not because I want to be this overbearing jerk that just wants to invade your privacy all the time." Too many times we have risk-averse leaders that feel like, well, I'm imposing on the troops here. And I know when you and I grew up, we had folks in our barracks and dormitories every day, or they were checking my automobile out every day. My leaders were checking my automobile out. And even back then, and K. Wright, I'm sure you're the same way, I didn't look at it as, man, this guy's really taking care of me. I was like, man, why is this guy on my butt? And until I started becoming a leader and I saw it was because they cared about me. So I think an engaged leader that is constantly dialoguing with their troops and they're building this team, and the team is born out of dignity and respect, I think the more they're like that, the more of this intrusiveness or invasion of privacy stuff will kind of go away, because the troops realize their leader genuinely cares about them. And I think that's what we have to do to get after this, because you'll be amazed at what you can find out when troops are in their off-duty time, and they might be in the dormitories of the barracks, or they might be off, in some of the places they hang out.
Yeah, I would say sometimes it is difficult, and I agree. Yeah. When I was growing up, I had a really, really tough mentor who did everything for me out of love, to include put me in the chokehold a couple of times and put me in a lot of really, uncomfortable situations, all in the effort to try to help me. One of the things that I would recommend to our young folks today is trust your gut. Sometimes your gut will tell you whether someone really has your best interest in mind. And sometimes they can be really, really nice and they may not have your best interest in mind, or they can be really, really tough and they actually do. They bring that tough love and they want the best for you. So sometimes you just got to trust your gut and trust that people are doing the right things and they're trying to get you to a better place in your life and in your career.
Yeah,
that's something that I had to turn to several times in my career, especially as a young man. Is, man, what is going on? What is this guy's angle? But whenever I would go to my gut, it would help me kind of understand. Okay, I don't like it, but he has my best interest in mind.
Okay, thank you for sending in those questions. For our listeners out there who would like to engage, you can find us on Facebook. On Facebook at CMSAF Official, Reddit at Team18 OCMSAF, and on Twitter at CMSAF18.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you.
So this is a huge military issue and certainly a big issue for us in the Air Force that we've been dealing with suicide. So for the last 5 years in the Air Force, we've been right around 100 or so suicides, plus or minus one or two. This year, we're mid-October, and we're already at about 112. I think we had 2 maybe over this weekend. And what are your thoughts on how we can keep our service members from choosing suicide as an option?
So this is a great question, and I'm with you. Over the last 4 years, looking at all the services, suicide rates, just when I think we're trending in the right direction, all of a sudden we go in the opposite direction. And here's one thing I've learned in 37 years of service and the last 4 years doing this job, is there are stigmas still out there in terms of troops wanting to get the help that they think they need. And we have to understand that as much as we focus on this physical health and resilience and everything, this behavioral health is a huge issue. And it's just not with the young troops. Throughout the ranks, this is something that we have to be cognizant. We have to accept it, that sometimes people may need some help. Mm-hmm. And whenever we, marginalize that behavioral health is a problem as leaders, or we tell people, hey, just suck it up. I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes people, just need to suck it up.
Right.
But we have to be cognizant of this, and we have to accept the fact that having behavioral health issues is something that is very prevalent in our armed forces. And I go back to this engaged leadership style. The more we are engaged as leaders, and the more we accept that if a troop says, hey, I think I may need some help, and we as the leaders make it our priority to get them the right help, I think the more we'll be able to get after this. You and I have sat on, I don't know how many panels looking at this, how many different, analyses that have been done to say, hey, here's what we need to do to get after this and everything. But in the end, I think it boils down to leaders at all level being engaged, understanding their troops that they're responsible for, and truly caring instead of marginalizing a young troop that may have an issue that we may not have had when we were growing up, but now they have. And I think the more we accept it and the more we understand that it's part of everyday life now, not only in our military and our society, then we can get after this stigma, and more importantly, we can get after folks that are looking for the answer through suicide.
Yeah. I would agree. We've made some strides in reducing the stigma. I'll just speak about the Air Force, and mostly from a model that we got from SOCOM, the POTA, Preservation of the Force and Families, by embedding some of the helping agency resources into the units and kind of normalizing mental health, behavioral health, making it normal for the commander and Command Sergeant Major or the commander and the chief to to go see the behavioral health folks and ask for help. Where I think we still need work is the social stigma. So people don't fear as much. They still do a little bit, but they don't fear as much that if I ask for help, I'm going to lose my clearance. I'm going to be deniffed, not be able to fly, or not be able to go to combat, or not be able to arm up. What they fear mostly now is what their teammates think. And so if I raise my hand and say, hey, I really need some help, is the prevailing attitude in my organization, yeah, man, go get what you need. It's going to be a little bit tougher for all the rest of us, but we'll take care of it. You just get better. That's the most important thing. Or is it, oh, man, now this guy is out again. He's having a little marriage problem. He can't handle it. And now we all have to work, that much harder.
Yeah.
And that pressure from peers is enough to make people say, hey, I don't want to be that guy. So I'm not going to raise my hand. I'm just going to keep it all boiling inside. And then sometimes it results in suicide, and sometimes it results in other, destructive behaviors, drugs or alcohol or abuse or something like that. So I think we, and this goes right back to what you were saying about having engaged leaders and teammates that make it okay, that make people feel like, hey, if you need help, I got it, man. The mission is tough, and we'll get after it. But the most important thing is that you get the help that you need, so that you can come back to us as a healthy person.
I'm going to share this here on this show. So I had some friends visiting this weekend. A lady whose her husband served under me in my Stryker brigade in Iraq during the surge, but her son came with her, and the son's wife and their baby girl. So they came to visit, and I had a great conversation. The son is a very good friend of mine, and he's an Air Force veteran, and his wife is a Navy veteran. And we had a great dialogue this weekend about behavioral health. Mm-hmm. And, certainly through 5 combat tours, but specifically Iraq 07, 08, and Afghanistan 11 and 12. Well, throw 10 in there. You were there at the same time, were some very trying times. And these 2 people are with, both veterans, had some trying times of their own in their career fields. And it was just so refreshing to sit around and have this discussion about behavioral health, and I'm like 25 years older than both of them. And one is a Navy veteran, one's an Air Force veteran. I'm a 37-year Army guy. And that we had this discussion was just so refreshing. And then, my wife, Sandra, and then our good friend, the mother, she was there as well. And I thought, if we could just mimic this across the Department of Defense, where we transcend service, we transcend generations, and we transcend service members and family members, and get after the root cause of the challenges here, we will be in a much better place. And I thought, to me, that was an inspiration to me this weekend, to continue to push forward with getting after this suicide and other things, that the destructive behavior stuff that you talked about.
Yeah, thanks. Just about a week ago, I think, we named your replacement. And
yes.
It happens to be an Air Force guy, Chief CZ Colon Lopez. And so you guys will swap out in December. And I'm sure you'll have many opportunities to give him advice and pass along things that you've been working on. But what would be the one piece of advice that you would give to CZ, as we know him, as everybody affectionately knows him, coming in to be SEAC number 4?
You got to build synergy in the senior enlisted force. That means you got to be a good team player. You've got to be a good listener, and you got to accept that each service is different, and each COCOM is different, and so you've got to look at the best out of all the services and the COCOMs, and try to develop this synergy amongst the top 20 senior enlisted, known as the Defense Senior Enlisted Leader Council. It's interesting. You mentioned CZ, and I first met CZ, I think it was 6 years ago, when he was the 18th Fighter Wing Command Chief in Kadena, and I was at U.S. Forces Korea, and I was visiting Kadena, And he and I, that morning, he had all his chiefs, and he said, hey, if you want to come out and do PT with me and John Wayne, come on out. Well, nobody showed up. It was him and I. I did have my communications NCO with me, but within a half mile, he had fallen out already. So it was just me and CZ on a 5-mile run. And we got done with the 5-mile run. And then throughout the day, he had me visiting, different parts of the wing, and I went into the the airman leader school and talked to the airmen in there and everything. Well, that evening he had a social, and he had all these chiefs there again. And so we get there that evening for the social, and there's like 20 of these chiefs there and everything, and CZ and I are the only ones having a beer. So when we talk about being yourself, we talk about not being afraid. Now, I'm not saying that, that because these guys didn't do PT or they didn't have an alcoholic beverage that there's something wrong with them. But I guess the point and why back then I knew CZ was somebody special is because he himself wasn't afraid to show who he was. And, then when he moved on to AFCENT and over the last 3 years at AFRICOM, he has just been a great teammate, as you know, and he's just been a very close personal friend of mine. And I think he is the exact guy to come in and replace me. The work that he's done on the African continent with the African nations in terms of their enlisted development and their NCO empowerment is just an example for the world to see. So I'm excited that he's replacing me.
Yeah, no doubt. He's going to be a great replacement and continue on the great work that you've been doing. So if you heard that ring, I think that's a special caller that we have. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Harry to introduce the caller for us.
Caller, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Oh, I just heard this guy's talking about me.
Oh,
speak of the devil.
CZ, what's up, man?
How's it going, gentlemen?
What's going on, dude?
Not much. Just over here getting some work wrapped up in AFRICOM, and just looking forward to sharing some airspace with you there, K-Ride, and be able to go ahead and take over after the great work that John Wayne Troxell has done for us.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's great. I was just asking SEAC if he had any words of advice for you coming into the job, and he talked a little bit about your background and how you guys met. I didn't even mention that CZ and I we got into the command chief business at the same time. I think it was either 2011 or 2012. And so we've been colleagues and friends ever since, and everybody's pretty excited. Somebody stopped by the office this morning and was excited and asking about when you were arriving. So, man, everybody's pretty excited, and so we'll be not necessarily the first, but the first on this podcast to say congratulations to you as SEAC number 4.
Very much appreciated, and we're definitely looking forward to the honor of filling the position as an airman. The other thing is, with leaders like yourself and the other service senior enlisted leaders, and the hard work of the current SEAC, John Wayne Troxell, definitely big combat boots to fill, man, but we're up to task.
Hey, man, what are you most excited about coming into the job?
I think it's an opportunity to continue to influence the decisions and the courses of action that affect the enlisted force, across the services. Clearly, that has been the most exciting thing about being a command chief, is to be able to affect change. And I think that change is going to be a constant, it's going to be needed. And I think that we need the right voice at the right levels to be able to do the best we can for our service members.
Hey, we also talked a little bit earlier about, how do we maintain balance? So you're coming into a pretty big job. John kept about a 270-day travel schedule. I'm about the same, maybe a little bit less, a little bit more every year. I'm not sure what your plan is. I know you have to get here and look at it, but you have any initial thoughts on how you'll be able to maintain balance with the job, the requirements, and I know Janet is a big outdoors person, and she'll have her own things that she'll want to do with you. What are your initial thoughts about, how do you stay balanced and stay resilient?
Balance is something that we have had 20 plus years of practice, especially since Janet and I have been together the majority of my time as a pararescueman. So this is nothing that is foreign to us. The one thing that I know that helps us balance that lack of time together is the ability to have a great time when we're together. Man, both of us have a great sense of humor, and we just love to laugh about everything. So we find ways, and we put ourselves in position to be able to go ahead and share laughs, sometimes at the expense of one another. But that is something that, much like you and Tanya, and John and Sandra, it's something that we have become really good at. So I don't expect my tempo to be any less than what you two are experiencing right now. And it's just a necessity of the duty to be able to have FaceTime and engagement with the troops.
I think we both, and I'll let SEAC jump in here in a second. We both we'll give you some thoughts once you get here, man. On you might keep the same tempo, but a little bit more measured. John talked earlier about this being a marathon. We both started off in a big sprint, and but we're gonna help you with the marathon concept, and so you don't find yourself in the same boat as he and I.
No, and lessons learned are probably like the greatest source of future successes, man. So I look forward to hearing you guys' take on it.
The one thing I've loved about you ever since I've known you is that you're not afraid to let people know that you're human. And Kay Wright and I have been talking about this, that a great aspect of as a leader is to not forget where you came from and not be afraid to show young men and women that we're human just like they are. What are your thoughts, brother?
No, I think that being who you are and exposing your vulnerabilities are one of the greatest ways to connect with people. It humanizes you. It lets them know that, hey, things haven't been perfect all the way through, but damn it, there's a way that you can get out of it. And when they look at the three of us, they can say, well, if they could, I can definitely freaking make it there. But I think that is a quality that the three of us have, is that we have never been shy of being ourselves around people. A lot of airmen still mention that. A lot of soldiers and sailors that I have come in contact with, they say that the comfort level that they had making a phone call or reaching out to me via email was the reason they ended up bringing their issues to another level. But, man, I think it's important. And I think the second we sell our souls to become something we're not, and even more dangerously, to give the perception of something we're not, eventually catches up to you.
Hey, I got one last question. You have done a phenomenal job as the U.S. AFRICOM Command Senior Enlisted Leader in your efforts over the last 3+ years in building enlisted development, building NCO development on the African continent has been the blueprint for what we should be doing globally. Now, as your battle space goes from just the African continent to the globe, what are your thoughts on continuing to get after line of effort number 2 in our national defense strategy of assuring allies and attracting new partners?
So thanks for bringing that up, John, because you know that I have been working with Zigafus over at Southcom to be able to go ahead and help them create a similar model to what we're doing in AFRICOM. I think that the strategy that we laid out to be more deliberate with our engagements, to ensure accountability and get the greatest return on investment, is a good mechanism to utilize globally. I'm definitely going to spend a lot of time not only talking to our COCOMs, but also to our allies to be able to go ahead and cross-share some of these initiatives and also some of the funding mechanisms and efforts that go along with it. But I think that collectively, you have built enough relationships globally to where I can follow on with what you have done and be able to go ahead and advance strategies like the Africa Enlisted Development Strategy forward with the other combatant commands. But it's all about the relationships, man.
Hey, great point, man. Relationships And hey, we want to say thank you, SEAC number 4. Man, we're all excited for you. The Air Force is just beaming. You being the first Air Force command senior enlisted leader to hold this position. So we're excited. I know you'll be here in a couple of months. So just keep us posted on how you're doing, man. And we look forward to, I think both SEAC number 3 and I look forward to sitting down with you and sharing a beer and sharing some leadership thoughts once you get to town.
No, absolutely, and likewise, I look forward to joining the ranks there and be able to go ahead and continue the work.
All right, thanks, brother.
Take care, brother.
All right, SEAC, we're coming to the end of our time, and so, man, let me just personally thank you for sharing this time. I want to personally thank you for all of the most importantly, the friendship. We initially met. I think somebody linked us up in Israel. And
yes.
We sat down and had dinner. I believe I was at 3rd Air Force at the time.
You were, yeah.
And we've just been, I would say, great friends and great colleagues.
Absolutely.
And ever since, you've been a huge supporter of our United States Air Force and all of our airmen, and just been a tremendous role model for all of us. And man, I really appreciate everything you've done for me and for all of our service members. But so this has been great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kay. Right, you are just the epitome of what a leader is, and all of the attributes and qualities we look for a leader. You embody them and you display them on any given day. I appreciate you allowing me to get out and visit airmen around the world and to be part of your forums as well. And my parting message to the force out there, in less than 60 days, I'm going to be trying to figure out what kind of hairdo and I want to wear, and whether I can grow a beard. I couldn't grow a beard when I was 18 years old when I joined, and I haven't had one in 37 years, so I don't know if I can grow one or not, but I'm going to darn sure try.
Yeah.
All right, but, when we say that the men and women that serve in the United States military are part of the greatest military on the planet, that is not arrogance, and that is not, trying to make us out better than our allies and partners, anybody else out there. But when you look, there's no other nation on the world that makes that kind of commitment to global peace and security. So to the men and women out there, be proud that you're part of the greatest Air Force in the world and the greatest armed forces in the world. But that comes with responsibility, and that comes with, duties that say every day you got to be striving for excellence. You got to continue to get better every day. As we've talked over the last hour plus, you got to get better every day, and you can't settle for just good enough. You got to continue to get better. So I would tell you, to the force out there, I know 3 things. I know we have the greatest military in the world. I know that we can defend our homeland and way of life, and we have competitive warfighting advantages in every traditional domain out there. But again, that comes with responsibility. And when I walk away on 13 December, I am going to be the biggest fan of this United States military, because I know we're in great hands as we move forward, because we've got great leaders, we've got great men and women that are going to carry this military far beyond SEAC 3 time and CMSAF 18 time. You know what I mean? So thank you so much for your leadership. But more importantly, thank you to you and Tanya for a friendship that you've shown Sandra and I. And I look forward to bourbon and cigars in the future when we're both working on our hairdos. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, man. You heard it here first. SEAC number 3 said it best. If better is possible, good is never enough.
That's right.
And you are your greatest competition. So this, once again, this has been the Blueprint Leadership Podcast. And I want to thank our first and very special guest, the senior enlisted advisor to the chairman, Command Sergeant Major John Wayne Troxell.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate
Air
you.
power.
All right. Cool.